What I noticed inside my own home wasn't evidence of betrayal, but it told me my marriage was already unraveling. Portland, Oregon has a way of amplifying quiet. The rain doesn't fall loudly, it lingers. It presses against windows and sidewalks like it's listening. That night, the city felt still, and so did my marriage. Mark came home late again. No kiss. No hey. Not even a glance. He walked past me like I wasn't there, dropped his keys in the bowl by the door, and headed straight to the kitchen. I stayed where I was, standing a little too long, waiting for something, anything, that suggested I'd been missed. All he said was, "Did you transfer the rent?" That was it. Not "How was your day?" Not "You look tired." Just a question about money, delivered flat and careless. I felt the sting settle quietly in my chest. The kind of hurt you don't react to right away, because acknowledging it would make it real. Later, I ate dinner alone at the table. Mark sat on the couch, phone glowing in his hand, thumb scrolling like whatever was on that screen mattered more than the woman in the same room. We were only a few feet apart, but it felt like miles. That night, lying awake beside him, it hit me. I couldn't remember the last time he asked how I felt. Somewhere along the way, I'd convinced myself this was normal. That marriage mellowed. That passion faded. That loneliness was just something wives learned to live with quietly. And then there was Evan, Mark's co-worker, occasional house guest, the kind of guy everyone trusted without question. He started stopping by more often, dropping off coffee, helping with small repairs, staying a little longer than planned. And I hated myself for noticing how different the room felt when he was around. Not because he crossed any lines. He didn't. But because he looked at me like I existed. One evening, he caught me standing alone by the sink and asked, gently, "Hey, are you doing okay?" The warmth of that question startled me, and the guilt that followed made my stomach twist. Later that same night, I heard Mark in the hallway on the phone, laughing. Real laughter. The kind I hadn't heard from him in months. When he hung up, I asked casually, "Who was that?" He didn't hesitate. "Work." Too quick. Too smooth. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. Cold. Sharp, undeniable. Because I wasn't just lonely anymore. I was suspicious. And if you've ever felt your chest tighten from one simple answer, stay with me, because what Evan said next changed everything. I wasn't searching for proof that Mark was cheating. I was trying to understand why he felt like someone I no longer knew. Suspicion didn't arrive loudly. It crept in. Not with lipstick stains or unfamiliar scents, but with subtle shifts that felt too deliberate to ignore. Mark started guarding his phone like it was an extension of his body. If I walked into the room, the screen tilted away. If I sat too close, it locked instantly. His laptop followed the same pattern. The moment I passed by his home office, the screen went dark, like my presence alone was a risk. Then came the gym. Not casual workouts. Not trying to stay healthy. It was obsession. New clothes. Supplements I didn't recognize. 2 showers a day. "I'm heading to the gym" became his excuse for everything. And the late meetings multiplied. So frequent I stopped believing they were real, but not brave enough to call him out. So instead of confronting him, I did what lonely people do when they're trying to keep it together. I started noticing things. A coffee receipt with a timestamp that didn't match his story. A charge from a market across town when he claimed he'd been stuck at work all day. Gaps in his timeline that only made sense if he was living 2 separate lives. One I saw, and one I didn't. And while Mark became harder to reach, Evan became easier. At first, it felt harmless. A simple text, "You okay today?" Then voice messages. Warm. Casual. Comforting. Small jokes that didn't mean anything. Until I realized I was smiling at my phone more than I smiled at my husband. I told myself it wasn't flirting. It was just conversation. But my behavior changed anyway. I deleted messages, just in case, even though I couldn't explain who I was protecting myself from. I caught myself waiting for Evan's replies with a restless anticipation that made me feel both alive and ashamed. I started dressing better, even when I wasn't leaving the house. Perfume returned. Earrings came back out of the drawer. I checked my reflection before walking downstairs, like I needed proof I still existed. My best friend, Lauren, noticed first. She didn't need a dramatic confession. One look at my face over coffee and she said, "You're not okay." I tried to laugh it off, but she didn't let me. Then she said something that cut straight through every excuse I'd been clinging to. If you feel the need to hide it, you already know it's crossing a line. That night, I tried to fix what felt broken. I suggested date night. Mark barely looked up. I suggested a weekend getaway, somewhere quiet, no phones, no distractions. He sighed like I'd added another task to his calendar. After this quarter, he said. I nodded like a supportive wife, then turned away so he wouldn't see the disappointment on my face. Later, when the lights were off, Mark lay facing the wall. I whispered, barely audible, I miss you and you're right here. He didn't answer. I stayed awake long after him, staring at his back like it belonged to a stranger. Then I heard it, a low, muffled laugh from his side of the bed. My stomach tightened. Who are you talking to? He didn't turn around. No one. Go to sleep. The next morning, I checked the trash because part of me already knew what I'd find. And deep down, the truth I'd been avoiding finally settled in. I wasn't just losing Mark. I was starting to lean on Evan just to survive it. And if you think Mark's secret ends there, don't look away, because the next mistake he made was small, but it exposed everything. When I finally uncovered the truth, it wasn't lipstick or condoms. It was words that were never meant for me. It happened on a quiet, gray afternoon, the kind where the daylight looks exhausted, like even the sky has given up. Mark left the house in a hurry. No explanation. No goodbye kiss. Just the sharp sound of the door closing and his footsteps fading down the stairs. I was still in my robe when I passed the home office and stopped cold. His laptop was open. No lock screen. No password prompt. No rush swipe away. Just sitting there, unguarded, for the first time in months. Like he'd forgotten, just once, that he was hiding. My heart climbed into my throat. I told myself to keep walking. To close the door. To pretend I hadn't seen it. Because once you look, you can't unsee. But my body moved before my mind could stop it. I stepped inside. My fingers hovered over the keyboard like they didn't belong to me. Then I clicked the email tab. At first, everything looked normal. Then I saw the subject line. You're the only one I can talk to. My stomach dropped. I clicked it. The betrayal didn't come the way I expected. There were no explicit messages. No dirty secrets. Nothing I could point to and scream cheater. It was worse than that. Mark was confiding in someone else. He wrote about stress. About feeling trapped. About needing peace. About wanting to be understood. Things he hadn't said to me in years. And the woman replying to him, his coworker, responded like she already knew him better than I did. I scrolled slowly, my breath shallow. Line after line, I read thoughts and fears he'd never shared in our home. He sounded softer there. More open. More alive. Like a version of him I hadn't seen in a long time. My body went cold. Not because I hated him in that moment, but because I realized I hadn't been his safe place for a long time. Then I saw it. She called him my person. He replied, You calm me more than anyone. My throat tightened, so hard I couldn't swallow. I kept scrolling, because pain has a strange gravity. Like knowing everything hurts, less than living with half-truths. That's when I saw the name that made my hand start shaking. Evan. A single line from Mark. Evan thinks I should focus on whatever makes me feel alive again. I felt dizzy. I backed out of the emails and grabbed my phone like it could ground me. I texted Evan. One sentence. Panicked. Barely thought through. I saw Mark's emails. He replied almost immediately. Too fast. Too calm. I was afraid you'd see it like that. That's when it hit me. Evan didn't just suspect. He knew. And he hadn't stayed close to protect me. He'd stayed close because he saw the opening. Before I could process the weight of it all, I heard tires outside. Mark's car. Early. I slammed the laptop shut like it burned my fingers and forced my face into something that almost looked normal. But inside, I was suffocating. Because now I could see the truth clearly. Mark had been giving himself to someone else emotionally. And I had been drifting in the same direction. Betrayal doesn't begin in bed. It begins in silence. And if you think I confronted him right then, think again, because what Mark did next proved he wasn't just distant. He was rewriting our entire story. I didn't plan to confront Mark that night, but betrayal builds pressure, and eventually you can't breathe without it spilling out. The rain turned heavier as the evening dragged on, cold, steady, relentless. Portland's streets shimmered under streetlights like the whole city was wrapped in a wet secret. I sat in the passenger seat while Mark drove us to his coworker's dinner party, watching the reflections blur across the window, forcing my face into calm. But inside my chest, everything was shaking. I had read the emails. I had seen the words he gave away. Soft words, intimate words, words that should have belonged to me. And still Mark drove like nothing had happened, one hand on the wheel, the other tapping along to the music like he wasn't carrying a second life inside his pocket. At the party, I felt like I stepped into someone else's world. People greeted Mark like he was golden, successful, charismatic, the kind of man everyone trusted. He laughed easily, told stories that made the room brighten. He looked alive in a way I hadn't seen at home in months. And I stood beside him like decoration. The wine flowed. The conversation stayed light. Someone leaned toward me and asked with a smile, "So how's married life?" Before I could answer, Mark laughed. "Oh, she's always dramatic," he said, waving his hand like I was an exaggeration. "She needs attention." The room responded with polite laughter. My smile froze. Heat crawled up my neck. My fingers tightened around my glass, so hard I thought it might crack. I nodded like it was funny, like my humiliation was just part of the entertainment. But inside, something in me went quiet. On the drive home, the car felt smaller than it ever had. I kept my eyes on the road ahead and asked as softly as I could manage, "Do you ever talk to anyone about us?" Mark's jaw tightened. "What are you talking about?" I tried again. "You've been distant. You've been somewhere else." He scoffed. "You're paranoid." I swallowed. "I'm not." He glanced at me like I was embarrassing him. "Can we not do this right now?" But it was too late. The truth had risen too high. It pressed against my ribs like it needed to escape before it killed me. When we got home, the rain had soaked the porch, and the house felt cold in that specific way only emotional emptiness can create. Mark hung his coat like the night was over. Then my voice cut through the silence. "I saw the emails." He stopped. For 1 second, he didn't move at all. Then he turned slowly. "What emails?" he asked, too controlled, too calm. "Don't do that," I said. "Not tonight." His eyes hardened instantly. "So you're snooping now?" My stomach flipped. "You left your laptop open." He stepped toward me, his voice dropping low. "You really think you're innocent?" That hit me like a slap. And then he said the words that made my whole body go cold. "You think I haven't noticed Evan texting you?" My stomach dropped straight through the floor. Mark's voice rose, sharp and accusing. "So what, are you cheating now?" I stared at him, stunned. "Cheating?" He pointed like he was building a case. "You've been hiding your phone. You've been quiet. Cold. So what is it?" The hypocrisy burned, so hot it made my eyes water. My throat tightened, but the truth pushed its way out anyway, ugly and raw. "No," I said. "No sex. No kissing. Nothing like that." I swallowed hard. "But yes." I leaned on him. I talked to him. I deleted messages. I let him become secret comfort. My eyes filled and I hated myself for it. "I didn't cheat," I whispered. "But I still betrayed us." Then I stepped closer, voice breaking. "And so did you." Mark's face stayed hard, but I saw something flicker in him, something defensive. "She's just easy to talk to," he snapped. "You're always upset. Everything turns into a problem with you." That sentence landed like a verdict. Like he'd already chosen who he wanted me to be in his mind, so he wouldn't have to feel guilty for replacing me. My phone rang in the middle of it. "Lauren." I answered without thinking. My voice shook the second I said hello, and she immediately knew. Mark's expression shifted when he realized I wasn't going to protect his image anymore. "Don't ruin my name over this," he said suddenly, pleading. "Not with your friends. Not with your family. Please." I stared at him like I didn't recognize the man I married. And that's when he finally admitted it. "I didn't sleep with her," he said, voice cracking. "But sometimes I wanted to." I went still. Because in that moment I understood something that made my stomach turn. Even without bodies, the line had already been crossed in his heart. I thought the confrontation would end it, but then Mark said one sentence that changed everything. And before the silence could settle, there was a knock at the door. I turned toward it, heart stopping, because the last person I expected to see standing there in the rain was Evan. And if you think he came to comfort me, stay here. Because what Evan wanted was something else entirely. That's when I finally understood. The deepest betrayals don't always involve bodies, they involve replacing someone's place in your heart. I left the house that night with shaking hands and a suitcase that wouldn't roll straight. Rain soaked through my jacket almost instantly, clinging to my hair and lashes, but I didn't turn back. Not once. Lauren opened the door before I could knock a second time. No questions. No judgment. Just arms around me and a quiet warmth that made my throat tighten with relief. Later, curled up on her couch, I finally let the truth come out. Not neatly. Not in order. In fragments. In half-sentences. In shame. Lauren listened until it went quiet. Then she said the thing I didn't want to hear, because it was true. You were starving, she said gently. But hunger doesn't make poison safe. Evan called non-stop. Again and again, his name lit up my phone like concern disguised as comfort. I'm here for you. You deserve better. You don't have to go back. For a moment, I almost believed him. Then something settled in my stomach, cold and clear. Evan wasn't showing up because he respected my marriage. He was showing up because he wanted to win. He had fed my doubts, watered my loneliness, and positioned himself as the soft landing waiting on the other side of heartbreak. I stared at my phone, hand steady now, and blocked him. I thought that would be the hardest part. It wasn't. The hardest part was what came next. I texted Mark. Not a long message. Not an argument. Just truth. I'm separating from you. If we try counseling, it will only work if accountability is real. I could have exposed him. I had enough to tear down the version of him everyone admired, friends, family, coworkers. But I didn't. Not because he deserved protection. Because I refused to become revenge. I chose private truth over public destruction. Therapy started a week later. Warm lighting. A quiet office. Rain streaking down the windows like the city was washing itself clean. I learned to name what happened without hiding behind excuses. I owned my part. I stopped pretending emotional betrayal was harmless just because it wasn't physical. For the first time in years, I chose self-respect over being the good wife. Then Mark sent one message that made everything click. I don't know who I am without someone admiring me. I read it twice, and I finally understood his betrayal wasn't passion. It was emptiness. But the final betrayal didn't come from Mark or Evan. It came from me, the moment I abandoned myself just to feel chosen. And just when I thought I'd survive the worst thing I ever would, Lauren sat beside me and said quietly, "You think this is bad? Let me tell you what happened in my marriage." And that's when I realized this story wasn't just about loss. It was about becoming someone I could finally live with. If you're watching and you've ever felt replaced, forgotten, or pulled into something you never planned, subscribe to Deception Diaries. Because these stories aren't just entertainment. They're real.